Hi, welcome to the Rewind Show. My name's Andrew and I'm your host. This is a new web series where we look at two films that are very similar, or could be direct remakes, but are separated by time, meaning that one is made in the present and one is kind of made either 10 or more years ago. The purpose of this web series is just to look at the films, look at their similarities, kind of discuss them, and both see how they kind of reflect the time periods and how they kind of relate to each other. At this point, I should say this is a prototype episode, meaning if you're seeing this still, it's not really the best production quality. But it's meant to kind of see what works, what doesn't work, how I can improve, and how I can make the web series going forward. So if you're watching this web series, feel free to leave a comment of any kind. It can be a trollish comment if you really want to see how I can kind of evolve or if we have any kind of constructive feedback. The first films we're looking at today are Fahrenheit 451 and Equilibrium. This is kind of the episode where we look at dystopian futures. But what is a dystopian future film? Well, a dystopian future film is a film that takes place in the future, obviously. It's a film where the future can either be very similar to what we have today, or it could be very different. It could have kind of wonderful technology innovations we kind of have always dreamed of. But with a dystopian future film, there's usually a cost, which is usually the government in place is very oppressive, or the people in the film are very oblivious to what's going on. It can be the people aren't allowed to breathe properly, which would be kind of a weird film to have, or it could be a film that the people are kind of overly obsessed with celebrity culture and don't realize the kind of corrupt and crazy world they live in. For instance, in the films Fahrenheit 451 and Equilibrium, we see a future which has two extremist ideas. In Fahrenheit's case, it's that books are banned and no one reads. And in Equilibrium's case, it's that emotions and feelings and art, anything that could elicit conflict or emotion, is banned. Both films follow two leads who are in charge of upholding this law, but that's where they begin to differ. So in Fahrenheit 451, you get a society which for multiple generations, it's implied, has kind of become used to the custom of not reading and just watching TV and taking things at face value and not really questioning or being super complex. But in Equilibrium's case, you have a society who is forced into this nature, who is forced to have no emotion. One film is about one person kind of coming to terms with the future that he lives in, and the other film is kind of about the main character becoming aware of the surroundings and the morality of what he's doing, and then doing something about it on a bigger scale. If we take both films, we can see the similarities at face value. We can see that they're both dystopian in nature, and it's hard not to think that Equilibrium was influenced by this film. But how are they different? How are they kind of different and kind of indicative of the time frames? Well, if we look at the 1960s, and a lot of the content coming out of that was about the future, about a futurism kind of ideology. Futurism being a kind of thinking about what the future could be, the kind of innovations that could come next, trying to logically predict how we will be innovative. In the 60s, futurism was a big thing. Even before the 60s, futurism was alive and well. But if we look at shows like Star Trek, which looked at a future that was devoid of all conflict on Earth and focused on exploring in space, where there are advances in medicine and communication and travel, where the main conflicts were of philosophy and of alien life, we can see that kind of hopeful, optimistic nature. But we're looking at Equilibrium, we're kind of jump forward 30 years, 2002, where you had the 80s and the 70s, where you had war and conflict, where you had the idea of the future being something kind of messed up. And of course, Equilibrium is a post-Matrix movie, meaning that it's very much a film noir kind of experience, which means that the costumes and the colors and the sets and everything around it, even the moods, are very dark. They're either dark gray or black or even dark blue. Those kind of feelings and emotions work well in a film that's about not having emotion. But in Fahrenheit 451, we see a future that actually looks pretty cool. If I was in 1966 and I saw a future with big screen TVs, with a transportation system that looked as cool as that monorail did, I would be pretty interested in. Even the colors of Fahrenheit 451 are very positive. They are very reds and pinks, and only the firefighters wear black. And kind of almost feeling of the SS or those kind of more militaristic forces like that. So how does this all kind of come together in the end? How can we look at these two films and kind of say, well, what is the point? What is the point of the future? So at the end of the day, these films are very interesting because they take place at very different times. One is in the 1960s and one is in 2002. But both films, while they're separated by a great distance of time, offer a very kind of similar idea of the future. A similar idea being that control and regulation of things that we never really thought of being that important, like emotions or of books, can lead to a completely different culture. And of course, these films are showing extremist ideas. So both films offer unique takes on kind of the same idea. And I think that's kind of interesting, that both offer very different outlooks of the future, very kind of different aesthetic styles, but at the end of the day, they're very relatable because, well, they send a very similar message. We should always be kind of trying to question what we're doing. We should always look at what we're doing from a point of view. You know, in those films, the outcomes for those characters are very extreme. But even in our reality today, we are faced with very similar questions. We're faced with fake news or with fact-checking or with very real leaders of the world who are kind of unfit to be leading. And how do we kind of take ourselves and kind of learn about our moralities and kind of put that into play in a society where things are getting kind of crazy? And I think these films offer two unique kind of viewpoints and takes on it. And I think that's interesting. Thank you for listening, and this is Andrew from The Rewind Show. Thank you.